Welcome to Treadmill Talks with Shannon Maves, a podcast for athletes and fitness enthusiasts to pass the time during mind-numbing cardio while I use my no-bullshit coaching style to educate, inspire, and entertain. I'm your host, Shannon Maves. Now let's walk and talk. Hello, and thank you for joining me for episode 46 of Treadmill Talks, the one about macro tracking. Now, given what I know about those of you who listen to Treadmill Talks, I would imagine that the majority of you guys are already tracking your macros, but I also know that I've got some listeners out there who have never tracked anything before. Or maybe they've tracked their calories or calories and protein, but not all three macros. I also know that with the start of the new year, there are a lot of people who are starting to track for their first time. Or maybe they're getting back into the swing of tracking after taking some time off from it. Whatever your experience is with tracking, though, whether you're a veteran or a true novice, I figured this was a good time of year to release an episode giving you some of my tips and tricks for tracking, because it can be a little overwhelming and daunting for some. And I want to start out by mentioning that you absolutely do not need to track your food to lose or to gain weight. It is 100% possible to get results without tracking macros or calories. But tracking generally does help to speed up the process for a lot of people. And it can teach you tons about nutrition as well as your own body. Being the queen of analogies, I've got a good one for you. I want you to think about tracking your food like tracking your finances. Let's say you have $2,000 and you have three choices. You can either spend $1,500 and put the other $500 into savings, or you can spend all $2,000 and break even, or you can spend $2,500 putting yourself into debt $500. Now, let's say you've got 2,000 calories and you've got the same three choices. You can consume 1,500 calories and be in a caloric deficit of 500 calories, or you could consume 2,000 calories and be at maintenance calories, or you could consume 2,500 calories and be in a caloric surplus of 500. One day of spending more or less money than you have might not seem like a big deal because it generally ends up evening out. But when you make the same choice day after day after day, you can eventually save a ton of money, live paycheck to paycheck, or put yourself into pretty substantial debt. The same goes for calories. Your body isn't going to reflect much of a difference if you eat in a surplus one day and a deficit in another day. But the amount of calories you eat consistently will result in weight loss, maintenance, or weight gain. So you can think of your calories as your financial budget, and tracking that caloric budget can make progress a lot easier and a lot faster. I love to have clients who are brand new to tracking start by just tracking their calories because it gives them a great idea of how much they're eating. But calories are not the most accurate method for tracking, nor do they teach you very much about what is in different foods or why we need certain amounts of protein, fats, and carbs. So after my clients get into the swing of tracking their calories, I'll add in a protein goal. Eventually, the goal is to eliminate their calorie goal and have them start tracking all three macros, because macros are the most accurate way to track what your body is taking in. First of all, not all calories are created equal. There is something called the thermic effect of food, and it's basically just a fancy way of saying our bodies expend different amounts of energy to break down and digest different foods. Protein has the highest thermic effect of all the macros, meaning that it takes the most energy for your body to digest. Fats have the lowest thermic effect, meaning they take the least amount of energy for your body to digest. So if you were to get 100 calories from pure protein, your body is going to expend more calories digesting it than it would if you were to get 100 calories from pure fat. And just so you know the amount of energy it takes to digest each one, Protein typically takes about 20 to 30% of total energy to digest, meaning that if you ate 100 calories from protein, your body will use about 20 to 30 of them to digest, leaving you with a net total of just 70 or 80 calories consumed. Fats only take 0 to 3% total energy to digest. So if you ate 100 calories from pure fat, your body would only use about 2 or 3 of them to digest, leaving you with a net total of 97 to 100 calories consumed, which makes it pretty clear why calories alone are not the most accurate way to track. Carbs are in the middle and take about 5 to 10% of total energy to digest. So if you ate 100 calories from pure carbs, your body would use 5 to 10 of them to digest, leaving you with a net total of 90 to 95 calories consumed. But carbs are a little bit more unique than fats or protein because you have to take into account the fiber that can be in carbs, which is why foods that are higher in fiber oftentimes report lower total calories despite their total carbs. But that's going to take me down quite the rabbit hole. And I already have an episode going into more depth about what macros actually are, as well as one about why food labels get away with that shit. So I'm going to move along now and talk more about macro tracking specifically. I'm about to give away a bunch of my hacks, tips, tricks, suggestions, or whatever you want to call them, starting with the biggest mistake that I see people making when they are tracking, which is waiting until the end of the day to log everything. As a coach, this is such a red flag when my clients do this because waiting until the end of the day leaves so much room for error. If you wait until the end of the day to log everything, don't you think there's a pretty good possibility that you might forget a couple of things? Like the sauce you put on your sandwich at lunch or the bite of cake that you had in the break room. And if you're weighing things out, which you should be if you're tracking macros, do you really think that you're going to remember every single measurement for the day? These things might not seem like a huge deal once in a while, but when you're tracking macros for the sake of being as precise as possible, those little things can add up quickly. Think back to your caloric budget. If you're trying to eat in a 500 calorie per day deficit and you're forgetting a 50 calorie bite here, a 100 calorie sauce there, and maybe a couple of other little things throughout the day, that 500 calorie deficit can disappear very quickly, putting you right at maintenance again, if not above. But let's say you have an unbelievably phenomenal memory and you remember every little thing that you ate and the exact amount that you had. Waiting till the end of the day is still leaving room for error because the chances you ate exactly what you were trying to are slim. You're most likely going to have to finish the day playing macro Tetris, trying to hit whatever remaining nutrients you have. Or you're going to look at your macros and go, shit, I went over my macros. And then you're going to email me and you're going to be like, Coach Shannon, should I do extra cardio or eat less food tomorrow since I went over on my carbs and fats? To which I will respond by saying, nope, move on and plan better tomorrow. Because planning ahead is going to set you up for success. Rather than waiting until the end of the day to track your food, go into each day with a loose plan as often as possible. I want to really emphasize the word loose here. If you go into each day with every single macro pre-calculated, then you're basically just following a meal plan. And part of the beauty of tracking macros, as opposed to following a meal plan, is that you have more flexibility and freedom to maintain variety. So what I suggest doing is deciding about how many meals you think you're going to eat and pre-track the main parts of those meals. Protein is typically the hardest macro for people to hit, so I recommend making that kind of the focal point around each meal. So let's say you like to eat 4 meals per day. Then I would log in your main protein source for each meal and make sure you get close to your goal, but don't worry about hitting it exactly since it's going to go up as you add other foods along the way. Then add whatever else so that you know kind of like, okay, I'm going to have oatmeal for my first meal, a sandwich for my second meal, yogurt for my third meal, and chicken and rice for my fourth meal. Get your macros kind of close to your goal, but still leave some extra room to add things in along the way. This way, you aren't having to set in stone exactly what you're going to eat. Because maybe you decide at the last minute, actually, I don't want to put banana in my oats today. I want to do shredded carrots, which is so good, by the way. If you haven't tried it yet, carrot cake oats are my favorite. DM me if you want my recipe. But this kind of macro tracking can help to take away decision fatigue because you already have an idea of what you're going to eat for the day. And you don't have to stress about whether or not it's going to fit your macros. But it still leaves you some room for spontaneity with things like toppings or sauces or whatever you want to use to mix things up depending on what you're in the mood for. Variety can be good to prevent boredom, but simplicity is great in its own way too. Obviously, the more simple your meals are, the less you have to think about them. But keeping it simple also makes them a lot easier to track, which is why I'm a fan of the KISS method. The KISS method is an acronym for Keep It Stupid Simple. Eating a meal with a ton of ingredients might be delicious, but logging a meal with a ton of ingredients can become a pretty big headache. Whereas logging a meal with just a few ingredients is going to be a lot easier. And less ingredients doesn't have to mean boring. You can keep it simple while still maintaining variety. My favorite example is chicken, rice, and veggies. It sounds so boring, but it can be about a million different things. Throw in some cheese or avocado to add some fats, bell peppers and onions for some veggies, and then toss in some chipotle seasoning and hot sauce for extra flavor, and boom, you've got a delicious Mexican dish with only like 4 or 5 ingredients. Not in the mood for Mexican? Okay, add some oil for fats. Throw in some mushrooms, broccoli, carrots, or whatever other vegetables that you're in the mood for, and season it with some ground ginger, red pepper flakes, and soy sauce. Boom! Chinese dish with similar macros and ingredients to your Mexican dish. Just please make sure to add some fruits and veggies to your meals too. Oftentimes when people track macros, they get so hung up on things like hitting their protein that they forget micros matter too. Don't forget your micros. Fruits and veggies can be a great way to add a ton of variety while keeping everything else simple. And it ensures that you get a good variety of micronutrients. I like to try to make it a goal to have at least one full serving of either a fruit or a vegetable with every meal. For me, this usually means 4 or 5 servings of produce. And bonus points if it's 4 or 5 different types of produce. Creating a simple and loose outline for your day can also help you to eventually figure out what type of meal structure and timing works best for you personally. Because when you stick to a fairly consistent meal structure and timing, after a while, you'll start to notice trends with your hunger and energy levels. For example, let's say you split your macros perfectly evenly throughout 4 meals, and they're each spaced exactly 3 hours apart. This can be great for simplicity's sake. But what if you start to notice that you get really hungry between meals 1 and 2? You could try taking away a few macros from meals 3 or 4 and adding them into meal 1. Or maybe you notice that your energy dips a ton between meals 2 and 3. You could try taking some carbs away from meals 3 or 4 and add them into meal 1 or 2. Generally speaking, I also find it is helpful to have slightly higher protein with your post-workout meal. Not only is there scientific evidence that this can help with muscle protein synthesis, but I've also found that most people tend to have more of an appetite within those few hours after a workout, and adding more protein can help to regulate that hunger a bit more. So If your goal is 140 grams of protein and you like to eat 4 meals, instead of eating 35 grams of protein with every meal, you could try having 40 grams of protein with your post-workout meal, and then just, 32 or 33 grams of protein with your other 3 meals. The jump from 35 grams to 40 grams should be enough to help you feel a little bit more satiated with that post-workout meal. And the jump down to just 32 or 33 grams of protein with your other meals should be small enough that you don't really notice it. The same thing goes with carbs and fats. But try to keep things fairly consistent between meals until you really know what kind of split works well for you. But do not macro hoard. This is a huge mistake that I made for the longest time. After doing a couple of preps, I had a fear of going to bed hungry, and I didn't mind feeling hungry quite as much throughout the day because I could distract myself by doing other things. So I would eat light all day and save a large portion of my macros for the evening so that I didn't have to go to bed hungry. I thought this was a good strategy to prevent my stomach from keeping me awake while I was trying to sleep when I was in a fat loss phase. But it was actually working against me, especially because I train early in the day. And under eating now can actually cause feelings of hunger to be higher later. Once I started giving my body the fuel it actually needed when it needed it, like around my workouts earlier in the day, my body started running a lot more efficiently. And I didn't feel the need to eat as much at night because I didn't feel as hungry because I wasn't running on an empty tank all day. Once in a while, if you have a big event at night and you know you're going to eat more, then yeah, sure. Maybe you can try to eat a little bit lighter during the day so that you can relax and enjoy yourself. But doing this on a regular basis is honestly just going to fuck your shit up, physically and mentally. And if you do have an event you're going to where you know you're going to eat more, I highly suggest you over-track whatever you eat while you're there. Unless the food you eat is weighed out and prepared by you personally, you're gonna want to over-track. Because there can be some seriously sneaky calories in foods at restaurants. I don't care what the nutrition facts say on their website or on MyFitnessPal, because I guarantee you that the 16-year-old pothead that's making your food in the back of the restaurant does not give one single shit how much oil or cheese or whatever else he's throwing into your meal. If you think you had a slice of pizza, log 1.25 slices. If you think you had half a serving of fries, log 3/4 of a serving of fries. But also be honest with yourself about it too. If you eat a full serving of fries at a restaurant and you find an entry to log that says 1 serving of fries is 100 calories, keep scrolling, because that shit ain't the same. A typical serving of fries is usually about 400 calories if you didn't already know. Yeah, 400 calories for a serving of fries. I know, it's not fair. I love fries. It makes me sad. But also, those 400 calories are not because of the carbs in fries. Most of those calories come from the fat that is in the oil that they're fried in. But that's the kind of stuff that you learn over time. If you're new to tracking and you don't know how much is in a typical serving of something, take a best guess and maybe find an entry that's like right in the middle. Or if you know that you're having a bigger portion, find an entry that is on the higher end, because remember, you want to over-track if it wasn't prepared by you. Another one of my little hacks for tracking food at restaurants is if you're trying to log an entry and you can't find the information online or in MyFitnessPal, use the Cheesecake Factory's menu. So if you're eating some local Italian place that definitely doesn't have their nutrition listed online or in an app like MyFitnessPal, look up the Cheesecake Factory's website. They have all of their nutrition listed on there. And their menu is so extensive that you can usually find something that is at least pretty comparable. If you didn't catch it, I said that you should over-track anything that isn't weighed out or prepared by you personally. Because even if you are the one who is personally preparing your meals, but you aren't weighing out your food, you should be over-tracking it. Something as seemingly small as 1 tablespoon of peanut butter can be the difference of like 100 calories. I've been doing this shit for a long ass time, and I consider myself pretty good at eyeballing portions. But if I'm in a fat loss phase, I weigh out every damn thing. And when you're weighing your food, you should really be weighing it raw. And I mean, everything should be weighed raw. Because depending on how you cook it or how long you cook it, food loses moisture. A 4 ounce cut of steak is going to weigh a lot less if you cook it well done versus if you cook it medium rare. A raw potato is going to weigh a lot more than a baked potato because it loses water when it's in the oven. Water, not calories or carbs or nutrients. It loses water weight. This doesn't mean you have to freshly prepare every single meal so that you can weigh out each individual portion. You can still meal prep in bulk. It just requires a little bit of basic arithmetic. For example, let's say you want to have 30 grams of rice with your second meal all 5 days this week. You don't have to weigh out 30 grams 5 separate times. You can weigh out 150 grams of rice all at once, and then once it's done cooking, weigh it again, and then divide it into 5 portions. But, okay, to be honest, when it really comes down to it, consistency is the name of the game with tracking. And if for whatever reason you really just can't weigh your food out raw, you can log it as cooked weight. But you just have to be sure to be consistent with how you are cooking and tracking it. Don't jump back and forth, logging it as raw some days and cooked other days, and logging a boiled potato as cooked versus a baked potato as cooked. That can be the difference of a ton of macros and calories. That's actually one of the things that I have on my list for my tips to avoid burnout with tracking. So why don't we go ahead and get into that a little bit more now? Because I know I have hit burnout hard with tracking before. One time was actually really recently too. I actually just started tracking my macros again a few weeks ago after eating intuitively for a few months because I had been tracking for way too long and I needed a break. But there are ways that you can prevent burnout like that. One of which is to not track for so goddamn long like I did. Unless you're in prep, take a fucking day off once in a while. Use it to work on intuitive and mindful eating. Because those are skills that you can actually lose if you track too meticulously for too long. I know, because I did. I was all hyped about eating intuitively until I realized, shit, it's been a while. But I'm actually going to get more into intuitive eating on next week's episode, so stay tuned for that. But I've still got a couple of other tips for preventing burnout if you are actively tracking daily. Okay, so I mentioned that you should try setting a goal to get at least 1 full serving of fruits or veggies with every meal. And I do really love that goal. But if you miss a serving of fruit or veggies with 1 meal, who cares? Just make sure your next meal has more and that it doesn't become a habit to not prioritize your produce. I was also pretty firm that you need to be weighing everything rather than eyeballing. But if this eventually gets to be wearing on you, go ahead and eyeball some of your low-calorie shit like mustard or greens. If you log 1 cup of broccoli instead of 4 ounces, I think it's going to be okay. That might only be the difference of like half a carb. Even if it's the difference of 2 carbs, if it helps you with adherence, I think it's worth it to eyeball those types of things. And lastly, I think the most important thing to help prevent burnout with tracking is to not obsess over triple zeros. Try to get as close to your numbers as you can, but chill the fuck out if you're a little over or a little under. Do not start obsessing over this because I promise it does not matter. Even if you were to hit triple zeros every day, there is still going to be some amount of variance. Just because different foods are going to be slightly different. Okay, I know this is going to be a weird example, but think about if you were to eat a human. Okay, go with me on this one, okay? I swear I have a point. But if you were going to eat and log one human, I don't know, a human leg into MyFitnessPal, that fat percentage in that leg is going to vary from human to human. Because if you ate 4 ounces off of the leg of a bodybuilder, that is going to be much leaner than 4 ounces off the leg of the average American. And that's going to be even less fat than 4 ounces off the leg of like a sumo wrestler or something. So, okay, I know we're not actually eating human, but the point is there is variance in all of our food. And not all chickens are created equal. And neither is every single avocado or slice of cheese or nut or grain or whatever. So even though you hit your triple zeros and it might be satisfying to look at, that kind of obsessive behavior generally does not end well. Trust me. Get close to your numbers, but don't obsess. I recommend staying within a percentage of your goal. Reason being is because when your macros are high, you have a lot more wiggle room than when your macros are low. For example, if you are deep into prep and your calories are at like sub 1,000, then going over your carbs by 10 and your fats by 5 adds an additional 85 calories, which is almost 10% of your total calories. That's a lot more than if you're in a building phase and your calories are over 3,000, because 85 calories is only like 2 or 3% of 3,000 calories. The lower your macros are, the tighter you're going to want to keep them. The higher they are, the more flexibility you have with them. So I think that's about it from me today. I guarantee that I have more tips and tricks, but I can't think of any of them at the moment. So as always, DM me if you have any questions or if you just want to chat. And if you're new to tracking or if you would just like some more accountability, support, and guidance, then click the link in the show notes to apply to work with me. Thank you for listening to Treadmill Talks. If this episode taught you something, lit a fire under your ass, or at least helped you forget how long you've been walking in place, please leave a review or take a screenshot to share on your social media. Don't forget to tag me at Shannon Maves so I can give you some love right back. And thanks again for listening to my Treadmill Talk.